You are a burden in my life, always have been. It was these words that sealed my decision. They didn't come from a stranger. They came from the man who gave me my last name, but I never respected him. My name is Emily. I'm 33 years old, and I'm the only child of a father who never made a point of seeing me as someone worthy of love, just as an inconvenience he tolerated out of obligation. I grew up in a beautiful house, with high walls and wide windows, but where each room seemed colder than the last. Nothing there warmed me, except perhaps the books I read hidden in the attic, to escape the heavy silences and the contemptuous looks of my stepmother, Veronica. Veronica came into our lives when I was 10, and my father was never the same again. The man was distant before, but after her, he became a shadow. At 12, I started hearing that I ate too much. At 14, I was ungrateful. At 17, which would be a hindrance in any man's life. At 20, I needed to go out and be on my own. And I tried. I tried hard. I worked in coffee shops. I studied on scholarships. I lived in rented rooms with mold on the walls. But no matter how hard I tried to prove myself, there was always a voice deep inside, his, whispering that I wasn't enough. The climax came one Sunday morning. I had gone to visit the house where I grew up, after months away. I picked up an apple cake that I had learned to make myself. I thought that maybe, just maybe, a simple gesture could break the ice a little. My father opened the door, looked at the cake, and asked dryly, "So, how long are you staying?" Before I could respond, Veronica appeared behind him, already rolling her eyes. "Is she still here? We had plans, remember?" I smiled awkwardly, said I was just going to leave the cake and go. That's when my father turned around, half closed the door and said, "Emily, don't take it personally, but you've always been a burden. We're in a good phase now. Don't complicate things." He said it as if he were commenting on the weather. Cold, almost bored. But there, in the middle of the garden my mother planted before she died, something inside me crumbled. And another part woke up. Because I knew every corner of that house. I knew the secrets. I knew the will my mother left before she passed away. I knew that even if they tried to erase me from the family memory, I still had a hidden ace in the hole. That house, it wasn't just theirs, it was mine too. And they had no idea what I was about to do. After that visit, I left the garden as if I were running away from a fire. My hands were shaking. My steps were light, almost invisible, as if the ground didn't want me there. That apple cake? I ended up leaving it at the gate. But his sentence hammered inside me like a curse. "You've always been a burden." I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling of my small rented apartment, listening to the pipes groan like my own soul. A part of me cried because I still wanted approval. The other was already making plans. But the real trigger was not just that sentence. That's what happened the following week. I received a registered letter, official. It came from a law firm that my father used for his family business. Inside was a document formally requesting that I renounce my right to inherit the family property. The house. The damn house. They claimed that since I had never contributed financially to its upkeep, I should not be bound by the deed, which was still partially in my name due to my mother's will. Signing that would mean giving up everything that was left of my story. And the most ironic thing? They offered me $5,000 as emotional compensation. $5,000 for my silence, for my exclusion, for my pain. I felt like laughing and screaming, but above all, I wanted to respond accordingly. I went in person to the office indicated on the paper, a mirrored building in the city center, where the marble on the floor reflected more humanity than the lawyers in their expensive suits. "I would like to speak to the lawyer responsible for the letter I received," he said, keeping his voice steady. The attendant typed something and replied, "Are you Emily Whitaker?" "Yes. One moment, please." I was taken to a cold room, where a gray-haired man looked at me over the top of his glasses as if I were a fly in his soup. "I believe everything is very clear in the document." "Oh, yes," I replied, smiling slightly. "I just wanted to look you in the eye before I tell you that not only am I not signing anything, but I am also going to exercise my legal rights down to the last comma." "That will be tiring," he replied, fiddling with his tie. "And expensive." "For me, it will be liberating," I replied. "And for them, devastating." By this point, I had made up my mind. They had betrayed me, so I would take them down the only way they would understand, by what they valued most: status and comfort. That night, I looked for my mother's will, scanned and saved on my drive, kept for years as a reminder that, one day perhaps, I would still find justice. She had left 50% of the house to me, in an irrevocable clause, with the rest to my father only under the condition that he would emotionally care for his daughter until she achieved professional stability. A subjective clause, yes, but a powerful one, especially after that absurd letter. I called an old college classmate, Claire, who was now one of the most respected attorneys in the state, specializing in inheritance law. You have a gold mine on your hands. I don't want gold, I replied. I want blood. Claire laughed but got the message. Okay, we're going to play strategically. First, silence, then action. It'll hurt more this way. In the days that followed, I kept up my routine as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was boiling. I knew that their world of porcelain and appearances was fragile, and that with the right move, it would completely fall apart. The most ironic thing? They thought they had won, which I would sign without thinking, as always. But this time, I was the earthquake they didn't see coming. The house where I grew up was not just a building of concrete and memories. It represented everything that was denied to me: affection, dignity, belonging. It was there, within those walls, that my father chose to ignore me. It was there that Veronica reigned as if I were an intruder in my own story. And now, that would be where their downfall would begin. But before any legal moves, something more subtle happened. Something inside me broke. It wasn't just sadness. It was the realization that I had spent my life begging for emotional crumbs from people who never even really looked at me. And when I realized this, I started to disappear. I stopped going to the places they knew. I deactivated my social media. I cut off contact with some relatives who were always on the fence. I changed my number. I started wearing headphones, even without music playing, just so no one would pull me back to that version of myself that I was leaving behind. I started working remotely. I moved to a nearby town and rented a small studio with an open-plan kitchen and an air mattress on the floor. I stayed there for weeks, alone, in silence. Sometimes I would cry out of nowhere. Other times I would laugh like crazy, just imagining their despair when they found out what was coming. The legal plan that Claire and I devised was not simple. First, we filed an out-of-court notice requesting the proper division of the property, as per the will. This meant that, in effect, I wanted my share of the house. Half, literally. The document was delivered by an officer directly to the family's residence. Claire let me know when he got there. I didn't see the scene, but I imagined every detail. Veronica opening the door in that fake silk robe. My father, perhaps reading the newspaper on the sofa, ignoring the presence of any employee. And then, the delivery, the paper, the reading, reality hitting like a slap. The next day, the calls started. First, 3 missed calls from my dad's number, then short messages. We need to talk. This is serious, Emily. You don't understand what you're doing. I didn't answer any. Because yes, I understood perfectly what I was doing. Silence is a deafening sound for those who have always spoken over you. A week later, an email arrived. A long one. It was from my stepmother, in a tone that she thought was cordial, but which was full of despair. Hi, Emily. Look, I know we've had our differences, but this house is all we have right now. Your dad is sick. He has high blood pressure. He can't handle this kind of thing. Please think carefully. Signing that paper was just a procedure to simplify things. We didn't mean to shut you out. It was just easier this way. Easier this way. It was this sentence that made me get up from my chair, punch the wall, and cry like I hadn't cried in months. They wanted me to disappear because it was easier that way. When I finished screaming to myself, I opened my notebook and replied coldly, "It was easy to live for years being invisible inside that house. Now it will be difficult. For you." I sent. I blocked. And I focused on the second phase of the plan. Because if they didn't want to give me my share, then I would take it the only way possible, by selling my half of the house. It seems impossible, I know, but it wasn't. Local legislation allowed that, in the case of co-ownership without consensus, the owner could judicially request the forced division of assets, or, as a last resort, the judicial sale of the entire property. In other words, I had the right to force the sale of the entire house on the market and receive my value in cash. And if they didn't want that, they would have to buy me out, for whatever price I set. It was a double-edged sword, and I was willing to use it. Meanwhile, family gossip began. A distant cousin sent me a message. Your father said that you want to take their house away from them. Is that true? Another wrote, Veronica said you're being cruel, that he's feeling bad about it. Ah, how ironic. Now I was the cruel one. Now the bale had teeth, and they were biting. Until one night, something unexpected happened. An old neighbor, Mr. Carlson, called me. He was a friend of my mother's and had lived in the house across the street for as long as I can remember. Emily, sorry to butt in, but I saw your father yesterday. He was acting strange. He said you wanted to destroy the family. I remained silent. He was crying, girl, the man continued. Really? Did he cry when my mother died? I asked, a lump in my throat. No. Okay then. I hung up. Yes, it was hurting, but it was necessary. I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting for myself, for Emily, forgotten, hurt, silenced for years. That girl who grew up being treated like a burden was now a woman with power in her hands, and no one would take that away from me. The pain no longer ate at me like it used to. Little by little, it was being replaced by something sharper, more distinct. Clarity, strength, control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't seeking affection where there was only coldness. I was the architect of my own destiny, and this time, with a blueprint, foundation, and sledgehammer in my hands. Claire, my lawyer, had already forwarded the legal petition requesting the division of the property. We knew it would be contested, that my father and Veronica would do everything they could to delegitimize my right. But we had the will, we had the clause, and now we had the momentum. Behind the scenes, I started plotting something even bigger. If I were going to force the sale of the house, that mausoleum of sorrows masquerading as a home, then I would make it irresistibly desirable to the right buyers. And that meant one thing: investigation. I hired a private real estate appraiser with the help of a friend from my old architecture course. I had him come to the house under the pretense of being interested in the property, pretending to be a buyer. He came in and talked to my father, who seemed desperate to show how valuable, classic, full of history the house was. He took notes, he took photos, he recorded audio. Then he called me. Emily, they have no idea of the legal status of the house. They are treating it as if it were 100% theirs. Great, I replied. Let me take care of showing you the reality. In the report, I discovered that the house, despite being old, was in an area where it was gaining value. The neighborhood was quiet, there were shops nearby, and there was potential for renovation, the kind of property that attracts cold, calculating investors. And that's when I got the idea. I contacted a real estate investment company, the ones that buy troubled houses, fix them up, and resell them for a profit. I told my story only in parts. I said that I was a co-owner of a property in dispute and that I would be willing to sell my share for below market value, as long as they took charge of the procedures and were patient. At first, they hesitated. But when they saw the full report, the records of the area's appreciation, and the possibility of forcing a total judicial sale, they were interested. Very interested. We reached an informal pre-agreement, subject to judicial approval. It was the first real move on my board, and I was about to give check. Meanwhile, Veronica began her campaign of victimization. I heard from an aunt that she was saying that I was obsessed with destroying everything out of envy, that I was disturbed, that I wanted to dishonor my mother's memory and destroy the family home. Ah, ironia. Veronica, the same one who had my mother's piano removed from the living room to put in an electric fireplace, the same one that exchanged floral paintings for soulless modern canvases. Now you came to talk about memory? I sent a cold, direct message with just one attachment, a photo of the piano, years ago, with me and my mother next to it. In the caption I wrote, "Memories are not protected by lies. Prepare yourselves." The next day, I received an email from the family's lawyer, trying to negotiate. "We are open to an amicable settlement, perhaps a fair amount for you to drop the sale request and transfer your share. We can talk civilly, civilizedly." Funny. When I was treated like a burden, was it civilized? I took a deep breath. I replied with just one sentence. "The value of my share is now double what you offered before. We will negotiate publicly, in court." Claire loved it. You not only have the legal advantage, but also the psychological one. They don't know what to do. Smile. Great. I want you to taste the panic. The preliminary hearing has been scheduled. Claire advised me to maintain a firm posture and not show any emotion, but inside, I burned. The night before, I slept little. But it wasn't because I was nervous. It was anticipation. Finally, I was back in that house. Not as a rejected daughter, but as half of the owner. And if they didn't want to share, that they would lose everything. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, without the movie courtroom dramas. Just austere chairs, worn carpets, and a judge with an expression too stern for the morning hour. Claire was beside me, with meticulously organized folders and impeccable posture. On the other side, my father, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the situation had finally sunk the arrogance he had sustained for decades. Veronica, of course, was there too, in high heels, heavy makeup, and a look that burned with hatred and despair. And it was there, in that cold, emotionless room, that the first real crack appeared. The judge began with basic questions, confirmation of names, presentation of documents, and then he read aloud, Will of Mrs. Margaret Whitaker, dated 1997, establishing that the property in question belongs 50% to the direct heir, Emily Whitaker, under an irrevocable clause, confirmed by the land registry. Veronica shifted in her seat as if she had swallowed glass. My father avoided my gaze. The judge then continued. Given the impasse between the co-owners and the lack of interest in a consensual agreement, the possibility of total judicial alienation opens up, as provided for in current civil legislation. Translation: the house can be forcibly sold. It was there that my father broke the silence. Your Honor, with all due respect, my daughter is doing this out of revenge. It's not fair. This house is the center of our family. The judge cut him off, impassive. The court does not judge emotional motivations, Mr. Whitaker. It judges rights, and she has one. The hearing ended with the case referred to mandatory mediation. Claire already knew this was coming, but it was just one more step. And from there, the pressure would only increase. And it was at this stage that my plan really started to bleed. I sent a formal notice to the investment company interested in the property, authorizing the proposed purchase of my share, subject to judicial approval. They then sent a lawyer specializing in property litigation to mediate. The goal? To press. Show that there were real buyers, big people, money circulating. Veronica freaked out. I learned from a reliable source that she contacted the company, trying to explain that the sale was a mistake, that everything could be resolved with a small compensation. They refused. She offered more. They refused again. They wanted the whole house. And they started making noise. They quietly advertised to local investors that they were eyeing a high-value property that was in the process of being legally released. The rumor spread quickly. Real estate agents began to appear on the street outside the house, taking pictures, asking for Veronica. She got paranoid. He had new cameras installed. He changed the curtains. He sent messages to neighbors trying to find out who was spreading rumors. Meanwhile, me? I continued in the coldest and most delicious silence of my life. I kept myself apart, but strategically informed. A friend from the old neighborhood, who hated Veronica with a passion, called me every other day with updates. They're freaking out, Emily. Your father is down. He looks like a ghost. But nothing prepared me for the day I received a new letter, this time from my father's own hand. Emily, I'm not going to pretend that I was the best father, nor that I'm innocent, but this house is what remains of our history. If you can, please think of another way, even if it's not for me, for what's left of your mother here. I folded the paper and looked at it for long minutes. Then, without hesitation, I threw it into the electric fireplace in my studio. Did he remember my mother now? When the house was at risk? How ironic. When she died, he spent more time choosing wallpaper with Veronica than he did mourning her. No. Now it was too late. And Claire, as a sharp strategist, took the next step. Scheduled the legal mediation meeting between the parties. A formal meeting with a neutral mediator where both parties present their proposals and try to reach an agreement before moving forward with the forced sale. The last appeal before the fall. Claire says, "This is the time to pull the trigger, Em. Either they pay big, or they lose everything." On the way there, I listened to my mom's playlist, smooth jazz, Ella Fitzgerald. It was like she was there somehow. And when I walked into the mediation room, I saw my father look at me with something I had never seen in him before. Fear. He knew. The burdensome daughter was now the judge of his fate. The mediation room felt more like a funeral than an attempt at a settlement. My father arrived with his head down. Veronica was impatient, chattering on her cell phone until the mediator came in. Claire sat beside me like a general about to lead a siege. The mediator, a bald, middle-aged man with a tired expression, opened the discussion. "We are here to try to avoid a judicial sale of the disputed property. The parties have the power to reach an agreement. If there is no progress, the process will continue with an official evaluation and forced auction." Veronica raised her hand immediately, as if she were in class. "Can we talk first?" "Of course," replied the mediator in a neutral tone. She took a deep breath and began her little act. "Look, I know there were hurt feelings, but this house, it represents a lifetime of work. My husband and I have taken care of it for over 20 years. It is our home." He turned to me with a rehearsed look. "Emily, I know we've had our differences, but to sell this now, it's not fair. It's not humane." "Ah, what is human for someone who dehumanized me for so long?" Claire spoke with cutting elegance. "What is not humane is to legally exclude the direct heir from half of the property for convenience. My client simply wants to exercise a legal right. But, as a sign of good faith, she is willing to sell her share for $320,000. below the current market value, taking into account the area's recorded appreciation. Veronica's eyes widened. This is a robbery! My father cleared his throat. Emily, daughter, don't call me that, I said, for the first time. My voice didn't shake. He swallowed hard. That's all she wants, Claire continued. A direct sale, without public display. If they refuse, the next step will be a forced auction, with the property valued on the open market. And of course, the costs of the process will be divided between the parties. The mediator sighed. And do you accept this amount if payment is made in cash? Claire confirmed with a slight nod. Veronica turned to my father, whispering too loudly for us not to hear. Do you have any idea what this means? If this gets out, we lose everything. I know, he said, almost whispering. I know. For the first time, I felt something strange looking at him. It wasn't pity. It was an observation. The arrogance that shaped my childhood was gone. The man who said I was a burden now couldn't look at me. The mediation ended without an agreement, formally, but the silent war had already reached a new level. 2 days later, Claire received an email. The family's lawyer indicated an interest in continuing to talk privately. They were desperate, and I didn't stop there. I began to subtly leak the rumor in neighborhood groups that the house was going into legal dispute and could go to auction. I used fake profiles, created a little buzz on local forums, and within a week I had people openly asking if the Whitaker mansion was for sale. Veronica freaked out. He sent a desperate message to my aunt. She's destroying our reputation. They're treating us like we're broke. And then came the final blow of that phase. An investor I had spoken to months earlier showed up at the same social club my father frequented and made a formal purchase offer. In front of everyone. I said loud and clear, Mr. Whitaker, I hear your house might be up for auction. If you're thinking of selling sooner, I'd be willing to talk. My partners are interested. We can pay quickly. My father was speechless. They say he left without finishing his drink. The next day, Veronica called Claire. Herself. He asked for a meeting. Urgent. We met at a discreet cafe, far from their neighborhood. She arrived wearing sunglasses as if she were famous. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her nails were badly manicured, a sign that her artificial world was beginning to crumble from within. Emily, listen to me. Please. We made mistakes. I didn't say anything. She continued. What do you want exactly? For us to get out of there? For us to lose everything? I want you to feel the taste of being disposable, I replied. Like I felt my whole life. But isn't there another way? Of course you do, he smiled. Pay me the amount I asked for, in cash, and I'll disappear. What if we can't? The house is going to auction. You will lose by less, and everyone will know that the burden has won. She stared at me for long seconds. There I saw fear, the real one. The fear of someone who has always had everything in hand, except control now. She stood up without saying anything else, but I knew. The next move would be theirs, and it would be the most desperate. Veronica left that meeting reeling between wounded pride and panic, and I knew the second she closed the cafe door that the war had entered its final phase. The phase where there are no more disguises, where the truth explodes in the middle of the room, and no one is left whole. 3 days later, I received the official notification from the court. The judicial sale of the house had been authorized. My father and Veronica were unable to present an agreement or pay off my share. The court had ruled, if there was no cash payment within 30 days, the property would be appraised and sold at public auction. Claire called me celebrating. We did it. The judge did not buy the sentimental arguments. She saw the coldness of their actions and recognized their right to liquidate. And they know about it? They know. And they are in collapse. Indeed, they were. 2 weeks later, a real estate agent called me, a woman named Rachel, sent by Veronica herself. She wanted to try to negotiate directly with me now. I wanted to buy my share, but for a much lower price than the one requested. You know they're struggling, Emily. You can't be so harsh. They were harsh when they called me a burden, when they tried to erase me from the scripture, when they emotionally expelled me from their lives. She was silent. Won't you reconsider? I am going? Yes. She perked up. I reconsider? Raising the price to $350,000. Now it's personal. Rachel sighed. They won't be able to pay. Then you will lose everything. And that's when the final, desperate attempt came. On the 28th day of the court deadline, my father showed up at my studio. Yes, he found out where I lived. Someone in the family, perhaps a cousin or an old acquaintance, passed on the address. He knocked on the door like someone who hadn't stepped foot in my world in years. He was wearing the same coat he wore on those cold Sundays when he ignored me in the dining room. Shelter. I didn't say anything. I waited. Emily, please. He wouldn't look me in the eyes. He was holding an envelope. Delivered. Inside, a check. $200,000. That's all we got. That's all we have. I closed the envelope without checking. You had everything, Dad. You had years. I asked for so little. He shook his head. I know. I failed. For the first time, he admitted it. But I didn't cry. I didn't give in. You didn't fail? You erased me. He fell silent. And then I said the sentence I had been waiting my whole life to say. The house is going up for auction. Tell Veronica she can start packing up her china. He tried to say something, but he found no words. He turned and walked away. And on the 32nd, 2 days after the deadline, the house went up for judicial auction. The investment firm I had been in contact with from the beginning placed the highest bid and bought it. Claire took care of everything: documentation, transfer, deposit. I received more than the $350,000 I asked for, and they lost everything. The furniture was removed. Renovation work began 15 days later, and it was at that moment that I sent my last message to my father's email, untitled, unsigned. Dear Father, the daughter who was a burden is now co-owner of the destruction of her kingdom. The house you loved so much now belongs to strangers. You could have had it all if you had seen me as a daughter. Instead, he chose contempt. Now savor the return. Yours sincerely, the part of the house you tried to erase. I never got an answer, but a neighbor told me that, weeks later, he saw Veronica crying while sitting on a bench in the square on the street, and my father never returned to the social club. It was replaced by silence, by humiliation, by the fall. The useless daughter? It was the only piece that held everything together. And when I left, I took the floor with her. When the house was finally emptied, something in me calmed down. It wasn't exactly joy, not even sweet revenge. It was as if a wound that had been open for years had finally closed. With a scar, yes, but closed. The house underwent rapid renovation. They changed the facade, removed the original garden, and modernized the interior. White paint, black window frames. That house, which for so long had been the stage of my erasure, was now unrecognizable even to me. I learned that Veronica tried to prevent the demolition of a portion of her front garden, where she said she planted her first violets. But nobody cared, because now, legally, she was nothing there anymore. The consequences were not long in spreading. Veronica and my father moved into a small rented apartment in an area far from the posh area. A former schoolmate who happened to live in the same building sent me a curious message. Girl, I just saw your stepmother in the elevator. Man, she's unrecognizable. She said her husband's daughter robbed their house. You're legendary. Legendary. Smile. Not out of vanity, but because for the first time someone saw me. And more than that, he saw the truth. My father didn't go back to work. He was already partially retired, but the sale of the house, the shame, the humiliation, was like the final nail in the coffin of his public. He lost his status, his club friends, and the one place where he pretended to be someone important. I learned from another source that he had to sell his luxury car to pay off some of the debts left over from his failed attempt to bribe me. Veronica, accustomed to brunches and spas, now worked as a receptionist at a beauty clinic, a position recommended by an acquaintance of hers who felt sorry for her. Meanwhile, I received the final deposit, $386,000 net, enough to breathe without fear, to get out of the cramped studio, to begin with, not a new life, but a life of mine. I rented a charming townhouse in a nearby, quieter town. I planted lavender in the garden. I bought furniture that I liked without anyone criticizing my style. And on a Sunday afternoon, I opened the box of memories of my mother that I had kept all these years. Letters, photos, an old diary. Browsing through, I found something that disarmed me. A letter she had written to me when I was just 3 years old. Never read before. Never opened. My Emily, if one day I'm not around, I want you to remember. You are not a burden. You never were. You are my light, my bravery in the form of a girl. Be what you want. Go where you want. And if one day they try to erase you, rewrite history. With infinite love, Mommy. I cried for hours, not for what I lost, but for what I finally got back. My voice, my identity, my truth. I then decided to donate part of the money to an NGO that takes in girls in situations of family neglect. I created a fund in my mother's name, the Margaret Light Foundation, because true revenge is giving back to the world what they tried to take from me. Dignity. Veronica still tried to contact her months later. A vague email trying to rebuild burned bridges. Can we talk woman to woman? Can we start over? I deleted it without replying. Some ghosts don't deserve to be exorcised, just forgotten. As for my father, he never made contact again. And honestly, it was the only time his silence did me any good. Today I walk past the old house without a weight on my chest. Another family lives there now. A young mother with 2 small children. They play in the garden like I never played before. And I, on the other side of the sidewalk, keep walking. No grudges, no rush, but with justice done. There's something strange about the silence after revenge. We think we're going to hear fireworks, but in truth, what comes is peace. A peace that doesn't scream. It just breathes. I didn't build this peace with flowers and reconciliations. I built with truth, with the courage to do what many people would spend their lives swallowing, with the audacity to say, no more. Today, my life is very different from that of the girl who slept in a cold room listening to the muffled sound of her stepmother's laughter in the living room. I have my corner, my garden, my own rituals. I don't live surrounded by luxury, but I live surrounded by something that is worth more: emotional freedom. I never had to beg for belonging again, because I understood that belonging starts when you choose yourself. And yes, there are still nights when I think about the past, in which I relive hard scenes. But on those nights, instead of pain, I feel a strange kind of pride, because I went all the way, without shouting, without putting myself down, with strategy, with purpose, and with a precise touch of justice. Sometimes people ask me if I would do it all over again. My answer: I would do better. Today, I work at an institution that welcomes young women who have left abusive homes. I mentor girls who, like me, were treated like mistakes. I tell my story, but not as a drama, as a rebirth. I use the remaining money to finance education and emotional independence projects. And little by little, that girl who grew up hearing that she was a burden, it became the bridge for other women to discover that they are power. Veronica, I don't care anymore. She was an obstacle, but she was never the end. My father? Maybe he's still out there drowning in regrets he didn't have the courage to say out loud. And you know what? That's his problem, not mine. At home, I don't miss it. I feel relief. She fell. And in its place, I built something that no one can take away from me: self-respect. When I get home, I look at my reflection in the mirror and repeat to myself as if it were a mantra: you are not a burden. You are the lightning that tore through the storm. If I ever have a daughter, I want to tell her everything, without omitting. I want her to know that pain exists, but that it doesn't define anyone, that self-love can be learned. And when the world tries to silence you, yes, you can answer, firmly, with justice, with dignity. This is my story. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't just the victim either. I was the author. And how lucky I am, having written the last chapter with my own hands.